Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at some of the guns that they're going to be selling in their upcoming February of 2017 regional auction. And I pulled out three here because I think they're a subject that's interesting that very few people are familiar with or conversant with. And that is Martini-Henrys from Afghanistan. Now, when most people think of this, they're immediately going to think Khyber Pass and the famous home gunsmiths in little sheds making fantastic quality guns or sometimes horrific quality guns out of like 3 drill bits and a file and some old truck leaf springs. And that is a thing. That kind of fabrication did take place, but that is not the full extent of gun manufacturing in this area of the world. So Afghanistan has a long and tumultuous history, of course. It was unified as a nation, more or less, in 1747. And from then, right on almost still to the present day, I suppose, it's been a crossroads between Asia and Europe and the Middle East, and been a place with a lot of conflict. Now, primarily in the time period we're looking at, this was conflict between the British Empire and the Russian Empire, both wanting to expand their influence through Afghanistan towards the other side of the world. And specifically, what led to the development of these rifles was some British technical assistance in the 1880s and early 1890s setting up a legitimate rifle factory in Kabul, Afghanistan. Now, apparently this wasn't strictly speaking a government-funded venture. It appears to have actually been run by a British engineer who traveled to India kind of to see the world and see some adventure and ended up finding himself in Afghanistan. And at the request of Abdul Rahman, who was one of the more powerful and famous and successful Afghan kings, or emirs, Abdul Rahman convinced him to help set up this rifle factory, brought in Western equipment, trained workers, and actually created a legitimate and successful fabrication facility. Now, this would run from the 1890s, it appears, through like the very early 1920s. And there were a whole variety of different styles of rifle made, which makes these pretty interesting. There are a couple folks, this area of collecting has actually become better informed as a result of the US and British military presence in Afghanistan of late, because there are gun collectors who are now hanging out around the military bases in places like Kabul, collecting these Afghan rifles and putting together well-documented information on the different varieties. And it's thanks to those folks that I have much of the information that I'm going to share with you today. There are basically 7 different documented styles of these rifles, and it's really cool that in this particular auction, Rock Island has examples, pretty good descriptive examples of 3 of these 7. Now, they did make carbines, which all 3 of these are, as well as short rifles, which are a little bit longer, and full-length infantry rifles. The carbines, I think, are the most interesting, and it's cool that that's what we have here. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the details, and I'll show you the evolution through these 3 patterns. Starting with an overview of all 3, we have our oldest gun here, our middle production, and our latest gun here. And you can see a number of changes that took place here. For one thing, let's start with these 2 are both in 577-450 Martini-Henry. This one is in 303. You can see that the sling swivel position changes. On this early gun, this early carbine really is a full-length rifle simply made as short as a carbine. It has the sling swivels from a rifle located on the bottom of the stock, which is convenient for a rifle, but not so convenient for slinging a carbine across your back. Then you'll notice that the nose cap and the front sight are of the style of a full-length rifle, this blunt nose cap, small little front sight. We'll look at those details up close in a moment. It has the large cocking indicator. If you look on the bottom of the stock, it's just wood. As the guns improved, frankly, the British guns improved and the Afghans took note and made similar improvements to their guns in Kabul. Notice here that these 2 later guns both have strengthening tangs on the front of the receiver. You'll also notice that we have a smaller pattern of cocking indicator here, and the sling swivels have moved from the bottom to the side. Flip it over, you can see we have a rotating sling swivel here and another one right there. And our 303 pattern gun is the same way. We have screws here for a leather front sight protector, although the sight protector itself is gone. And then if we look at the two more recent nose caps, you'll notice that they change. So this is reminiscent of a British Martini carbine instead of a full-length rifle with this full tapered nose cap. Pretty much the same thing here. And then the front sight patterns changed as well. So this is a wing protected front sight, and the 303 one here is just a ramp. Now there are some recorded examples, which unfortunately I don't have one of here to show you, but there is a later pattern of nose cap in 303. They actually went to a Rigby style of nose cap, which has a bayonet lug to attach an 1888 pattern Lee Metford bayonet. These carbines all are incapable of accepting bayonets. Now we can also see that there are two different styles of marking. These are both formal, proper markings for the factory, and the early ones use a symbol of a mosque, and about 1909 that symbol was changed to a mosque inside an 8-pointed star. So both correct. The markings underneath here, this long line of script, I believe is the name of the arsenal, which I believe is pronounced Jangalak or Jangalak. I apologize to everyone, that's probably terribly pronounced, but I believe that is the translation of this line of text. That text does stay the same across all the different variations of marking. These guns are also dated, so this is our very first one. This is our early pattern 450 caliber gun, and we have a date right there, and that translates to 1315. Now this is in an Afghan or an Islamic calendar. If we translate that to our Gregorian calendar, it turns out to be 1897. So these guns went into production in the early to mid 1890s. This is still a relatively early example. And actually in 1898, the British engineer who helped set up the factory, whose name by the way was Salter Pine, in 1898 he had been there for 13 years and he took his leave and went back home to Great Britain, leaving the Afghans to continue working on their own. Our middle pattern gun here, also dated. The date location has changed slightly. This is 1319, which translates into 1901. And then our 303 example, again dated, and this date is 1328, which translates to 1910. Now rifle production, or rifle and carbine production, would continue until about 1919 or 1920, I believe. Again, a lot of this is pretty hazy. Now, I don't know what this little inscription is up top. If anyone does, please educate us in the comments. I'd be very interested to find out. One of the other changes that was made through production is they started serializing the guns. The very early guns, I believe, were only serialized on the nose cap, although the example we have it seems to have been worn off. There's no serial number I can find on the gun. On this middle dated one, we have a 3-digit serial number here on the barrel. We have that serial number here on the reinforcement, right there on the front band. A lot of these are difficult to see because this gun has certainly seen better days, but we have another serial number there on the middle band, and then we find it on the reinforcing strap here, the trigger guard right there, and the loading lever right there. The same serialization takes place on our 303 caliber example, with the interesting coincidence, and this appears to be a coincidence. I looked at a bunch of pictures of other examples, and this doesn't seem to be a typical thing. This one happens to have the same date and serial number. So serial number is on the receiver, on the barrel, on the front band, on the nose cap reinforcement, on the rear band, this strengthening rib, trigger guard, loading lever, and it's the same number as the date. We also have these two marks up on the Knox form, and I don't know what those indicate. So if I am mistaken in this being both the date and the serial number, coincidentally the same number on this particular gun, hopefully, again, someone will let me know in the comments. If you are proficient at reading this old style of Afghan script, please let me know. I'd love to learn more about this. So it's interesting to look at these and realize there's such a huge variety of guns like this that are out there. There are legitimate British manufactured Martini-Henrys. Then there are well-made fakes of British Martini-Henrys. There are basically license-made copies of British Martini-Henrys from this area. And then there are factory-produced, but not British, Martini-Henrys like this one. There are fake Kabul-made martinis like these. I've seen some pictures of some of those, and those run the gamut, well, mostly not so great in quality, but just everything you can imagine. Every possible type of manufacturer. There are real ones, there are faked ones. You would think that, you know, the Kabul, who wants an Afghan-made martini? Well, people do. There's enough interest in it that it was worth someone's time to make fake Afghan martinis. So for a lot of people, the only interesting Martini-Henry rifles are the British ones, because those are the proper ones, they're official, they're legitimate. But if you're willing to expand your scope a little bit beyond that, I think you'll quickly come to realize that there's this huge variety of really interesting history embodied in a whole wide variety of other Martini-Henry rifles. If you are interested in having any of these three yourself, if you think it'd be pretty cool to have an Afghan Martini carbine or two, take a look at the two links in the description text below. Two of these are in a single lot, and the third one is in a separate lot. Both of them in this regional auction, the guns typically are in batches, and so you can take a look at the pictures and the descriptions and the other guns that are batched together with these guys. Their price estimates in there as well. And if you're interested in bidding on either of the lots, you can do that right through Rock Island's website. Thanks for watching.